My wife kept me drowsy just to meet with her lover. It's crazy how long it can take to notice something that happens right in front of your face, especially when it's slow, quiet, and dressed up as love. In the beginning, it wasn't suspicion, it was gratitude. We were finally entering what people call the second act of marriage. Our daughter Mia had just left for college and moved into her dorm, and suddenly the house that once echoed with her playlists and her half-shouted phone calls felt still. Peaceful, sure, but almost too quiet. I thought maybe that quiet was making me overthink things, but at the time, nothing felt wrong. Not really. I was 44, married for nearly 2 decades, still working full-time as a logistics supervisor, still waking up early and coming home beat. Maybe more beat than usual, but nothing dramatic. I just figured I was aging out of energy. I used to stay up watching movies, working on side projects, fixing things around the house. Now I come home, take off my boots, and suddenly feel like my body weighed double. Like gravity had turned up just for me. The weirdest part was how it always hit me the same way, right after dinner. Not before, not mid-commute, not during the workday. After dinner. That hour after I put the fork down. And it wasn't the kind of full-belly tired that everyone gets. It was bone-deep, blanket-heavy, no matter what I do I am closing my eyes exhaustion. But what was I going to say? Honey, your cooking's too good. It's knocking me out? I didn't even question it. I told myself it was just age catching up, or maybe I was out of shape, or my blood sugar was off. I didn't track it, but I felt it. Every single night. Linda, my wife, had taken over cooking most of our dinners since Mia left. Said she wanted to get back into it, that it relaxed her. And I didn't argue. I'd walk through the front door and she'd be standing at the stove with something already simmering. Pasta. Chicken stir-fry. Creamy soups with garlic bread. Always something good. She served our plates separately, one for me, one for her, then sat across from me like it was date night. At first, it felt nice. Like we were reconnecting. Like we were rediscovering us, without a teenager in the house. We'd talk about our day, or sometimes she'd tell me funny stories she'd read online. She laughed more. Her eyes sparkled more. There was something livelier in her that I hadn't seen in a while. She seemed lighter. And I thought, this is what people mean when they say the nest is finally yours again. But I noticed she always handled the plates herself. I'd offer to help dish out the food and she'd say, I've got it. Just sit. You look exhausted already. She was always right. I did feel tired. So I let her. She'd bring both plates to the table and set mine down a little closer, pour my water or wine, and then sit. She always waited until I took the first bite. I thought it was sweet. At the time. Then came the sleep. I'd barely make it past dinner. I'd finish my plate, go sit on the couch to catch the evening news or scroll my phone, and the next thing I knew I was waking up hours later in a daze, sometimes with my shoes still on, the TV long gone to black, my body aching like I'd hiked up a mountain in my sleep. When I'd look at the clock, it was always later than I thought. 10, 11, once even close to midnight. Linda would be upstairs by then, already in bed, sometimes reading, sometimes asleep. I'd ask why she didn't wake me and she'd say, you looked like you needed it. And I'd agree. I did need it. Because no matter how long I slept, I still felt like I hadn't rested. That kind of fatigue messes with your confidence. Makes you feel fragile. Less like a man. There were nights I'd drift off thinking, I can't even get through a movie anymore. I blamed work. I blamed age. I blamed stress. But I never once blamed her. Not then. And that's the part that still makes me sick. How long it took me to even consider that something was wrong. Linda kept being her usual thoughtful self. Packing leftovers for my lunch the next day. Making my tea exactly how I liked it. Texting Mia every evening and always reading me the replies like a proud mom. If she had secrets, she hid them behind the kind of warmth that feels earned over time. But little things started to shift. She began stepping away more during our conversations, claiming she had to use the bathroom or answer calls. Her phone became glued to her hand, always tilted away from me. She'd smile at it sometimes and pretend it was Mia texting, but when I'd ask what she said, Linda would just shrug and say, nothing worth repeating. I didn't think much of it. She had friends. She had her own life. I trusted her. We weren't one of those couples that needed to be up in each other's business all the time. But something about the rhythm was off. One night, we were eating lasagna, her recipe, the one she always saved for Sundays, and she asked if I was okay. I said yeah, just tired. Again. I remember she looked at me for a second longer than usual, then said, I wonder if you're low on iron. Or maybe you're just not getting good sleep. I could make you some natural supplements. I said, you mean vitamins? And she laughed. Something like that. Then she reached across the table and touched my hand, and I felt a rush of guilt for even thinking that anything was off. But there was. I didn't know what it was yet, but my body was telling me something my brain refused to hear. Like the fog I felt wasn't just inside me, but around me. One night I woke up groggy on the couch and noticed the clock said 11:47. I had no memory of falling asleep. My plate from dinner was gone. The lights were dimmed, and the back door was locked, but the deadbolt was off. I never leave it like that. Ever. I told myself maybe I forgot. Maybe I was losing my edge. Maybe I needed a doctor. The next morning, Linda was already in the kitchen with coffee waiting, smiling like everything was fine. She asked if I slept well, and I said yes. She smiled bigger. That smile that holds something back. I didn't realize yet that she was measuring my answers. I didn't realize yet that she was watching me just as much as I was beginning to watch her. But I would soon. And the tiredness I thought was just a part of getting older, it wasn't mine to carry. It was given to me carefully, quietly, every single night. It started so subtly I almost missed it the first time. One small motion in the middle of an ordinary evening, buried in the rhythm of a routine that had become too familiar to question. Like always, dinner was already waiting when I got home. Linda had reheated something from the night before, creamy pasta and grilled chicken, I think. She always cooked the day before, stored it neatly in labeled containers, and took care to serve our plates herself. She said it made things easier, more efficient. Less stress. I never thought twice about it. That night, I walked in a little earlier than usual and caught a glimpse of her finishing up at the kitchen counter. Her back was to me, but I saw her take something small from the cabinet above the stove. A tiny jar, white plastic, like the kind used for supplements or pills. I couldn't see the label clearly, just a flash of text, then her hand turning quickly as she unscrewed the lid. She held it just above one of the plates. Could have been either one from my angle, and tipped something into the food. It was quick, barely noticeable. A little tap of powder or crushed pill onto the corner of the mashed potatoes, followed by a light swirl of her fork to mix it in. My first instinct wasn't suspicion. It was confusion. I stepped forward just as she was turning around, and she smiled like nothing was out of place. Set the plates on the table. Told me dinner was ready. We sat down like always, across from each other, like we'd done 1,000 times. She passed me the water, unfolded her napkin, and started eating. That part stood out to me. She actually ate. Bite after bite, talking casually about something Mia had texted her, about some neighbor's dog getting loose, about how the weather was finally warming up. Meanwhile, I kept replaying what I saw. That tiny flick of motion. That jar. When the meal was over and we were both finishing our drinks, I casually asked her what she'd added to her plate. She paused, then smiled again, same soft, harmless smile as always, and said it was just some new vitamins her friend had recommended. Said they were supposed to help with stress, maybe hormones. Said she was feeling run down lately and thought it wouldn't hurt. I nodded and said nothing more. But something in the back of my mind was still awake, still watching. The next few days followed the same pattern. She reheated food she'd made the night before. Served both plates herself. Always brought them to the table. Always ate from hers without hesitation. And every single time, just before sitting down, she did the same subtle move, a quiet reach into that upper cabinet, a flick of the wrist, and a short, barely there sprinkle onto just one of the plates. I tried to catch which one, but she was fast and careful, and by the time we sat down, everything looked identical. She never looked guilty, never acted nervous. If anything, she seemed relaxed, happier than usual, even affectionate. She asked about my work more often, brought up old vacation plans we'd never taken, joked about how maybe the empty house was good for us. But I started noticing something she didn't think I would. Every night after dinner, like clockwork, I'd feel tired. Not normal tired. Heavy. Foggy. Like someone had pulled the air out of the room and left me running on fumes. My eyes would start to close without my permission. My limbs would drag like I'd done hard labor all day, even though I hadn't. And every single time, she'd tell me to go rest, that I looked exhausted, that I should lie down and stop pushing myself so hard. But she never looked tired. She stayed up folding laundry, answering emails, texting with friends, brushing up on recipes, or scrolling through social media. I started to think it was just me. Maybe I really was getting old. Maybe my body was burning out from years of hard schedules and little breaks. Maybe this was normal, and I was just noticing it more now that the house was quieter. I told myself that every night. But that didn't stop me from watching her more closely. One night, I made an excuse to pass through the kitchen while she was finishing the plates. I said I needed to grab my charger. She smiled and said sure. I stepped past her and caught a glimpse of the jar again. Same white plastic, same half-peeled label, still tucked behind the jar of cinnamon she never used. I slowed down just long enough to glance at it, but she noticed and shifted her body slightly, blocking my view. Told me dinner was almost ready. I didn't push it, just walked out and waited. And again, she brought both plates to the table. Sat down, ate her food, bit by bit, like there was nothing wrong at all. I ate mine too, mostly out of habit. And just like always, the weight came back. That unbearable, fogged-up heaviness in my chest, my head, my arms. She told me I looked beat and suggested I lie down. I did, but I didn't sleep. Not really. My thoughts were too loud. Something wasn't right. I just didn't know what. Then came the night everything shifted. I told her I'd eaten with a colleague after work. Something simple, just a late lunch that had run long. It wasn't true. I was starving, but I wanted to see how she'd respond. The look on her face changed instantly. Her smile faded, just slightly. Then she tilted her head and asked why I didn't tell her sooner. I said I didn't think it was a big deal. Her voice sharpened. Said she spent all afternoon reheating everything, making sure it was perfect, and now I was just going to skip it? I told her I could eat it tomorrow. She said that wasn't the point, that it was rude, thoughtless, inconsiderate, that I clearly didn't appreciate her effort. The outburst came so fast and so sharp, it stunned me. She wasn't yelling, not exactly, but her words hit harder than they should have. It wasn't about the food. It was about something else. Something she hadn't planned for. I apologized, kept my tone calm, told her I appreciated her. But the damage was done. She stayed distant for the rest of the evening. No small talk. No warmth. Just a cold kind of silence. And that told me more than any argument ever could. Because if I'd truly eaten already, it shouldn't have mattered. Not like that. But it did. Enough to shatter the routine. Enough to break the script. That's when I realized I wasn't imagining anything. There was a reason for the ritual, for the careful plating, for the hidden jar, for the identical meals with just one silent difference. And she didn't like when I refused to play along. I didn't know what was in that jar, but I was going to find out. And I was done pretending to be tired. There's a very specific kind of calm that comes right before betrayal shows its face. It's not silence. It's the performance-off silence. A quiet so perfectly placed it feels artificial. That's what I noticed the first night I decided not to actually fall asleep. Everything felt too smooth, too practiced. The routine hadn't changed since the last time I pretended to eat. Linda made dinner like usual. Reheated food from the day before. Set the plates. Smiled. Sat across from me and asked about my day like she hadn't nearly lost her mind the night I skipped a meal. This time, I ate just enough to keep her at ease, or at least made it look that way. I scraped the plate, sipped the water, swirled my fork through the mashed potatoes the same way I'd watched her do when she mixed in whatever she was slipping from that white jar. And like always, she ate too. Cleaned her plate with perfect timing. Never rushed. Never suspicious. But I noticed something new. She kept glancing at the clock. Small, short looks. Just enough to track time. That's when I realized this wasn't just about getting me tired. This was about how long I'd be out. She was timing it. Measuring it. My body was still reacting to the small amount I'd eaten, but I was prepared for that. I kept moving. Kept walking. Fought the weight in my limbs. Forced my eyes open wide when she wasn't looking. The fog didn't win this time. It couldn't. After dinner, she told me I looked tired. I nodded and said I'd go lie down early. She offered to bring me some tea. I declined. I walked up the stairs slowly, like I was drained. I let my shoulders sag, dragged one foot a little behind the other. I knew she was watching. In our bedroom, I lay on top of the covers in my work clothes, shoes still on, arm draped over my eyes like someone already gone. Then I waited. My breathing stayed shallow and slow, like sleep. I let time stretch. I didn't move. I listened. I counted the creaks in the hallway, the sound of the dishwasher humming downstairs, the soft ping of a text tone from her phone. She never came up to check on me. She never once asked if I needed anything. Because she didn't care if I was okay. She cared that I stayed unconscious. About 30 minutes passed. Then I heard it. The back door. A soft click, the kind that comes from someone used to sneaking through it without a sound. My ears sharpened. Every instinct in me turned razor-edged. I slid off the bed carefully and crawled across the carpet toward the window. From the corner of the curtain, I had a clear view of the backyard. A car pulled up to the curb. Black, compact, headlights off. It stopped in front of our mailbox and sat there for a moment. Then the passenger door opened, and a man stepped out. Tall, broad-shouldered, dressed well. I couldn't see his face from the second floor, but he walked like he knew where he was going. Like this wasn't the first time. He didn't hesitate. Just moved straight through the gate on the side of the house, the gate only we used, and disappeared beneath the shadow of the porch overhang. Seconds later, I heard the back door open again. Not the kind of open that says surprise, or you caught me, or what are you doing here? It was calm. It was expected. It was part of a plan. I didn't move from the window. I kept watching the car. It stayed parked. Engine off. Lights off. Like it had no intention of going anywhere soon. Downstairs, I heard the soft clink of glasses. Footsteps in the kitchen. Low murmurs. Laughter. Hers. His. Muffled, but unmistakable. My wife was downstairs with another man, while she thought I was knocked out from whatever she'd been slipping into my food for weeks. I didn't feel angry. Not yet. What I felt was the slow, steady burn of clarity. The kind that makes you see everything you missed. The nights she stayed up late. The moments she touched her phone and turned away. The way she timed her questions to make sure I was too tired to answer them. It was never about me needing rest. It was about removing me, dulling me, making me absent enough for her to live like I wasn't there. I stayed at the window for over an hour. I didn't move. The car didn't leave. The house stayed quiet. Eventually, I saw a flicker of movement near the porch again. The man stepped back into view, adjusting his shirt sleeves as he walked. No rush. No hiding. He got into his car and drove off like someone who'd done this many times before. I waited another 10 minutes before moving. I slid back from the window, stood slowly, and sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the floor. Not thinking. Not yet. Just absorbing. The weight of what I'd seen was heavier than anything she'd ever put in my food. And still, I didn't confront her. I didn't shout. I didn't demand answers. I went back to pretending. Because I needed more. I needed to know if this was one mistake or a system, one betrayal or a routine. And I wasn't going to let her see me coming. The next morning, she greeted me like nothing had happened. Asked how I slept. Told me I looked more rested. She said it with a smile. The same one I'd watched her give him the night before. I stopped calling it home in my head. I don't know when exactly it happened. Maybe the night I first watched that car pull up. Maybe the night she kissed someone else in the kitchen I built with my own hands. But I remember the shift. This place used to be warm. Mine. A reflection of who we were. Now it felt like I was walking through a space stage for someone else, like every picture on the wall had been arranged for a version of our life I wasn't allowed to participate in anymore. Nothing had physically changed, but everything felt off. Too quiet. Too clean. Too well-timed. The towels were always freshly folded, the air always faintly floral like she sprayed something to cover whatever wasn't visible. I started noticing that even the fridge looked curated, matching containers, symmetrical placement, portions that never looked disturbed. Like the house wasn't being lived in so much as managed. And it wasn't just that I didn't feel welcome anymore, it was that I didn't feel real. I felt like a prop in her theater. Something to tuck in after dinner. Something to explain away if anyone asked. And through all of that, she kept smiling. She kept making dinner. She kept setting both plates. Kept eating hers slowly, steadily, while watching me from across the table. She never rushed me. Never pressured me. Just waited, gently, until I cleaned mine. And I always did. Or pretended to. I started watching the process more closely, the way she pulled the containers from the fridge, the way she kept her back between me and the counter during plating, the way she never let me serve myself anymore, even though we used to cook side by side all the time. She handled it all now. She said she enjoyed taking care of me, but I didn't feel cared for. I felt controlled. One night, after we finished eating and I feigned another slow-motion collapse onto the couch, I waited until I heard her upstairs with the hairdryer going. That sound gave me about 15 safe minutes. I crept into the kitchen, trying to recall exactly where she always reached when she plated the food. The upper cabinet to the right of the microwave. It looked like a normal spice cabinet, cinnamon, paprika, some expired thyme, a half-used jar of nutmeg from last Christmas. But the small white jar? The one I saw her hold? It wasn't there. Not behind the cinnamon. Not behind anything. I moved items carefully, quietly. Nothing. My stomach tightened. I stood still, listening to the sound of water running upstairs, the occasional thud of a cabinet closing. Then I turned to the second most obvious place, the drawer she called her miscellaneous basket, old receipts, loose rubber bands, an emergency flashlight, random keys we never labeled. I combed through every item with surgical precision, placing each one back exactly as I found it. No jar. I opened the drawer next to the fridge, the one with the spare kitchen tools. Still nothing. My pulse was climbing. I wasn't even sure what I expected to find, but not finding it made things worse. It meant she wasn't just hiding it from me now, she was hiding it in a way that required effort, thought, secrecy. I opened the pantry, checked the back corner where she once stashed seasonal baking supplies. Nothing. The laundry room. The guest bathroom cabinet. The drawer in her desk. Still nothing. I kept moving, each search more frantic than the last, though my hands stayed steady. I told myself I had to stay calm, keep control, not get emotional. But inside, something was tearing. That jar had become more than a piece of evidence. It was the symbol of everything I no longer had in this house. It was the secret I wasn't allowed to name. And the fact that she kept moving it, that she had to keep it hidden, meant she knew. She knew it was wrong. She knew I might find it. And yet she kept using it. I cleaned up every trace of my search and returned to the couch, pulling the blanket over myself like a man defeated. I didn't sleep that night. I barely blinked. I just laid there, staring into the dark, feeling the walls close in around me. Every noise in the house became suspicious. Every cabinet that opened. Every floorboard that creaked. I couldn't trust the silence. I couldn't trust the air. I started to feel like the house itself was trying to lull me back into that false sense of comfort she had been feeding me for weeks. The kitchen where we used to laugh. The couch where we watched movies with our daughter. The stairs we used to sneak up together when Mia was finally asleep. None of it felt real anymore. She'd taken every room and filled it with her lies. And every time I looked at her, I wondered how much of her smile was real and how much of it was rehearsed. There were moments, small ones, where I'd catch her watching me out of the corner of her eye, like she was checking for signs. Was I drowsy yet? Was I losing balance? Was the dosage working? It wasn't love in her gaze anymore. It was measurement, assessment, timing. And I realized something else in those moments. She wasn't afraid of me. She was afraid of being found out. And that meant I still had power. The next few days I played it cool. Watched my tone. Laughed when I was supposed to laugh. Nodded when she made comments about how we've been doing better lately, or how the space in the house really helped. I even agreed with her when she mentioned maybe taking a short trip together soon. I let her believe she was winning. And she kept smiling. Kept cooking. Kept serving me that same warmth in a bowl laced with silence. But now I ate even less. Sometimes just a bite or two. Then I'd swap the plate mid-meal when she wasn't looking, dump the rest in a paper towel, and toss it deep in the garage trash where she'd never notice. I never let her see me suspicious. But my eyes never left her hands. And every time she reached up toward that cabinet, I burned the motion into my memory. Because even if I couldn't find the jar yet, I knew it was there. Somewhere. She kept it close. Probably moved it room to room depending on where I was. Maybe she carried it with her, or hid it in the lining of her purse. Whatever the case, she protected it more than she protected me. And that was the moment I knew this had gone far beyond infidelity. This was calculation. Planning. A system. One that required I never be awake long enough to notice. But I was awake now. And soon, someone else would be too. The thing about living in a house that doesn't feel like home anymore is that eventually, you stop thinking of it as a place of safety and start thinking of it as a crime scene. You become hyper-aware of every motion, every shadow, every small sound behind a closed door. I knew she was still putting something in my meals that made me unnaturally tired. I knew he was still coming. And I knew I couldn't keep handling it alone. It had been weeks of watching. Weeks of pretending to eat. Weeks of keeping my eyes cracked open just enough to track her steps without flinching. But now, I needed confirmation from someone who didn't wear my face, someone she couldn't accuse of paranoia or emotional projection. I needed someone else to see it. So I called Sam. Sam was one of the few people I trusted without flinching. We'd known each other for years, met back in college, worked a couple odd jobs together, then drifted apart like people do when life gets busy. He became a cop. Then after retirement, private security. Quiet, discreet, good at his job. I hadn't told him much at first. Just that I needed help confirming someone was entering my house while I was out. But when he agreed to meet up, I brought everything. Timelines, routine breakdowns, notes from my nightly tracking, In one blurry photo I snapped of the car parked outside on one of those nights she thought I was unconscious. I laid it all out on the hood of my car in the far corner of a strip mall parking lot, 2 towns away. Sam didn't interrupt once. Just looked, nodded slowly, and let the weight settle. Then he asked one question. He asked if I had proof I was being drugged. I told him not direct evidence, but that I'd watched her add something to my food nearly every night, and that when I skipped a meal, she reacted with the kind of panic that didn't match the crime. I also told him I searched the house for the jar I saw her use, and it wasn't where it should have been. He asked if I thought she moved it daily. I said I knew she did. That part was no longer a theory. He rubbed the side of his jaw, thought quietly for a few seconds, and then offered to come that week. Late, after dark, hidden. No gear. No setup. Just him, a thermos of coffee, and a pair of eyes I could finally share the burden with. We chose a Wednesday. I told Linda I'd be home late from work due to an inventory audit, which wasn't unusual. She nodded like she always did, smiled with that same softness I now knew had layers under it, and told me she'd save a plate in the fridge. I parked my car 3 blocks away at an abandoned church lot and walked the rest of the distance through the trees behind the neighborhood. Sam had already arrived, parked a few houses down, lights off, windows cracked, wearing an old ball cap low over his eyes. I slid into the passenger seat and showed him the time on my phone. We had about 30 minutes until her usual routine would begin. We sat in silence. I didn't have anything left to say. I'd lived this already, over and over. I just needed someone else to finally see it. At 9:55 p.m., the house lights shifted. The kitchen dimmed. The living room went amber, soft lighting only. She always did this. She never turned anything off completely, just enough to set a mood. Sam leaned forward slightly in his seat. I could see him watching the side gate through a small gap between 2 parked cars. No movement yet. At 10:08 p.m., we both saw it. Headlights down the block. No turn signal. No noise. A black sedan crawled up slowly, then coasted to a stop across from the house. The driver stayed inside for almost a minute. Then the passenger door opened. It was him. Broad-shouldered. Confident. He stepped out like a man walking into his own apartment. No hesitation. He didn't knock. He didn't check windows. Just walked straight down the path, through the side gate, and disappeared behind the fence. I didn't breathe. Not once. Sam didn't move either. He just exhaled slowly and muttered something to himself, low enough I couldn't hear. The motion-activated porch light flared on. Then the back door creaked open. She was there, right on schedule. He stepped inside, and the door shut behind him like it had done a dozen nights before. But this time I wasn't the only one who knew. Sam leaned back and looked at me. His face didn't hold judgment, just quiet confirmation, like something had been scratched off a list. I didn't need to say it. He saw it all. I asked if that was enough for now. He said no. Not if what I suspected about the food was true. He said this was more than a fling. This was calculated incapacitation. If what I told him was right, she wasn't just cheating. She was controlling my state of consciousness to carry out an affair inside my home while I was unable to consent, respond, or protect myself. That changed things. That crossed a legal line. I asked him what the next step was. He took a breath, reached into the side pocket of his jacket, and pulled out a second phone, his work line. He didn't dial emergency services. He had a number for direct dispatch, quiet, local, not dramatic. He gave a calm report, explained the situation in plain, legal terms. A suspected pattern of deliberate fatigue-inducing behavior inside a private home, unexplained additives possibly affecting the homeowner's state, regular intruder present during hours when homeowner is rendered unconscious, and a request for quiet support to confirm presence and observe before engagement. No sirens. No spotlight. Just 2 uniformed officers who would arrive soon, park around the block, and wait for his signal. Sam said they'd probably knock if we gave the word. I didn't answer right away. I kept staring at the window where I knew they were sitting together. My wife and this man. Drinking my wine. Using my furniture. Occupying a life that wasn't theirs to occupy. I finally turned to Sam and nodded. He didn't ask again. He ended the call with a short, understood, then placed the phone back in his jacket. Now there were 4 of us who knew. Me. Sam. 2 officers and an unmarked cruiser inching their way through the neighborhood shadows. I felt something strange then, relief, almost. Not because it was over, but because it was finally real to someone else. I wasn't tired anymore. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't alone. And within minutes, she wouldn't be either. The cruiser rolled past slowly, parking just behind the third house on the left, lights off, engine quiet. If I hadn't been looking for it, I wouldn't have even noticed them arrive. Two silhouettes inside. Calm. Still. Waiting. Sam had already briefed them. Told them we were observing an ongoing pattern of unauthorized entry and suspected involuntary sedation. No weapons in play. No violence. But something deeper. Something worse. I stayed in his car, watching the window where I knew they were still sitting, where I knew she was still pretending I didn't exist. Inside my own house. With another man. The room stayed dim. Occasionally a shadow moved past the curtains. Probably her. Probably him. Laughing at something. Sipping my wine. The same wine she used to save for our anniversaries. The same living room where we used to pile onto the couch with our daughter and watch movies with popcorn. Now it was a set piece for an affair. Now it was a crime scene. I didn't want the police to go in shouting. I didn't want her to be able to spin it into some misunderstanding. I wanted the moment she opened that door to feel like the ground cracking beneath her. Sam waited for my nod. I gave it. One of the officers stepped out, adjusted his radio, and casually walked up the street. Not toward the front door, but around the side, to the gate. The same gate her lover used. The one she thought no one ever noticed. The officer didn't knock right away. He waited, listened, then opened the gate slowly and stepped into the yard. A few seconds later, his partner came up the front walk and stood by the door. That was the moment. Sam opened his door, looked at me, and said I might want to stay put. I didn't respond. I was already out of the car. I stayed in the shadows across the street, far enough not to interfere, close enough to hear everything. The back door must have had a window view of the gate, because suddenly the porch light snapped on, and the door opened. Her lover stepped out first, confused, looking around like he thought it was a neighbor or some random disturbance. Then the officer raised his badge and said something I couldn't hear. The man froze, said something back. That's when Linda stepped into view. Robe tied, glass in hand, hair up. Her entire face changed when she saw the officer. Not fear at first, confusion. Then panic. I could see it from across the street. She said something to the officer. He responded calmly. Then she looked behind him and spotted the second cop walking up to the front door. Then she saw Sam, standing with his arms crossed by his car. Then she saw me. I wasn't hiding. Not anymore. Her mouth opened slightly like she wanted to say something, but no sound came out. The man beside her turned toward her, whispering something quickly, then stepped forward like he thought he could explain it all away. The officer didn't move, just held his hand out and gestured toward the steps. The man paused, then complied. Hands visible, slow movements. No scene, no yelling, just the cold, quiet collapse of a plan that had run too long without interruption. Linda didn't follow. She stood frozen in the doorway, one foot inside the house, one foot out, like stepping any further would shatter whatever illusion she'd been living in. The officer outside asked if she would come to the front. She didn't move, just looked at me. Across the street, standing with the weight of everything she thought she'd buried. She tried to say something then. I still don't know what it was. Maybe it was sorry. Maybe it was denial. Maybe it was another excuse, another line, another carefully curated version of reality where I was just paranoid, tired, distant, the husband who worked too much. But this time, no amount of gaslighting could shield her. I didn't answer. I didn't even blink. She was escorted to the front of the house where the other officer gently, but firmly, guided her toward the car. No cuffs. Not yet. But a conversation was happening that wouldn't end well for her. Sam walked back over and leaned against the hood of his car. I stayed silent. He stayed silent. Sometimes truth doesn't need commentary. The officers didn't arrest anyone on the spot. It wasn't that kind of bust. But the questions they asked were direct. And what she didn't say told them more than anything she could have come up with. When they asked about the powder, she said she didn't know what they were talking about. When they asked if she'd ever added anything to my food, she laughed too quickly. When they asked where the man lived, she pretended not to know. But we all saw the look he gave her when they separated him by the cruiser. He wasn't scared. But he wasn't loyal either. The kind of man who runs when the spotlight comes on. The officer told me I'd be contacted the next day, that I'd need to make a formal statement, that they'd be investigating the substance I believed was being administered without my knowledge, that if I could locate the jar or provide any samples, it would help their case. I said I'd look, and I would. Every inch of that house would be turned inside out. Not to punish her, not for revenge, but to reclaim it. For myself. For the years I'd lost in sleep I didn't ask for. For the nights I wasn't allowed to be present in my own life. Linda didn't say anything as they led her back toward the door. Her hands shook. Her mouth opened once more, but no sound came. She didn't look at me this time, just stared at the porch like it would swallow her whole. And in a way, it did. That was the last time she stood in that doorway as my wife. After that night, there was nothing left for her to explain. Nothing she could salvage. The plate she'd so carefully prepared for me had shattered in her own hands. And I was finally, truly awake. Would you go that far just to hide the truth?